Hi, Ashley here, and welcome to my messy life. I am going to do a video on 14 things you should think about before you move into the middle of nowhere, and I'm going to take you on a walk around my yard while we complete the video. So here we go. Before you move to a rural area, consider these things. Are you still going to be working in town? If yes, how far is your commute? What time will you make it home at night if you are commuting? My husband commutes 50 miles to work and 50 miles home every day. He leaves at 7 a.m. and he doesn't get home until between 7:30 p.m. and 9 p.m. most nights. How much extra are you going to pay to maintain your vehicle? Take into account how much driving you're going to be doing and how many oil changes you're going to need. My husband needs 2 oil changes a month to maintain his vehicle. How far are the schools from your house? The closest school to our house is 25 miles away. The bus does come pick up for that school, and it comes at 5:45 in the morning, but we no longer send our children to that school after 2 years of really trying to work with the school. It just didn't work out. Most people in this neighborhood don't send their kids to that school. It's just got a really bad reputation. It's just not a good school. So we choiced our kids, we got a waiver. And because we have a waiver, we no longer qualify for any sort of bus transportation, even though the closest bus stop is about 2 miles from my house, which would really help out a lot as far as driving is concerned. How far away is the nearest store? The nearest store is about 25 miles away from our house, about a half-hour drive. So that means that if we need to go to the store because we forgot something, or we need something in an emergency, it's pretty much a guaranteed hour and 15 minutes minimum. And that's if there's no line and you're only getting one thing. How far away is the nearest doctor's office from your house? Again, about half an hour away from our house, nearest doctor's office. And we actually take our kids to the doctor's office in our old town because the doctor's office here, I've actually seen people throw up on the floor, and the people who work there refuse to clean it up. One of the parents in the waiting room ended up cleaning up, and I ended up helping them, even though it wasn't my child that threw up, because it was just so gross. How far away is the nearest EMS station or hospital? It takes EMS about 20 minutes to get to my house, driving as fast as they can. The nearest hospital is about half an hour away, just like everything else. I recently got really bad heat stroke and my blood pressure dropped to 80/28 at the lowest. By the time the EMS got here, I was having chest pains, I got really dizzy, and I almost passed out, and I had to call 911, and it took them 20 minutes to get here, and that was pretty terrifying. So that's another thing to think about, is how far away are the closest emergency services from your home. This leads us to the next thing that you should think about, which is how much yard maintenance are you going to need to perform to maintain your acreage if you move out into a rural area and you have a lot of acreage to maintain. We have a riding mower, which is actually technically a garden tractor because a riding mower would not perform well on all of our dips and valley-like terrain. And we also have a bush mower and a push mower for the first acre of our land because we don't want to compact the soil. What are you going to do if your car breaks down and they can't find the part? Recently, this summer, my car broke down and it was broken for basically the entire summer. I was without a car for a total of 9 weeks. It was really rough to not have a car, not be able to go to the store, not be able to take my kids anywhere, not be able to take them even to a park to play. It was really rough. If you have small children, think about how far away you are going to be from your support system. I am over an hour away from my family, and I still drive to see them once a week. But it's really hard not to have any sort of support system. Nobody to help pick your kids up from school if an emergency were to happen. It's just you. And I just didn't realize how hard it was going to be when we chose to move out here. Suggest you take a vacation week before you choose to move out into the middle of nowhere and really just live that life. Drive the amount of miles you're going to need to drive to take your kids to school every day. Only go to a store, I would say, for at least a month so that you can get a really good idea of the whole store thing, since it's not something that happens all the time. For an entire month, I would say only drive to a store that is as far away from the rural area that you're choosing to move to for an entire month. Because you need to think about how many times in a month you're going to need to drive to a store and figure out if that's sustainable for you. Personally, I have fibromyalgia, and so living out in the middle of nowhere is really wearing me down. There are a lot of nice things about living in the middle of nowhere. As you can see, I'm walking around my neighborhood right now and there's no traffic. I can mostly just let my daughter run, which is great. But honestly, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have moved out here. Think about how often you take your kids to a park. And if you plan on continuing to take your children on that many outings, I would spend about a month driving to a park that is 25 to 30 miles away from your house as many times a week as you normally would. And then maybe spend a whole month just doing it once a week, and then maybe not doing it at all, and just see what it feels like to not be able to take your kids on the normal amount of outings because you're too tired from taking them to school and picking them up, and it being 2 hours of driving a day. Take some time and really figure out how important your social network is to you before you move out into a rural area, because living out in a rural area, there aren't as many parent groups, support groups, play groups at the park, things like that. There just aren't as many opportunities, and even if you find some, you're gonna have to drive much further to get to them. And if you have, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, some other autoimmune thing going on where you have less energy than most people, it's gonna be markedly more difficult to have any sort of social life. And so I would really just take some time and live that life. Figure out how much you'll be able to do if you have to drive that far to do things, and live that life. Feel what it feels like to be alone that much with your kids and without other adults and without other parents. Because another aspect of the puzzle is that if you live 2 towns down from the nearest social group for parents, you're kind of going to be an outlier. You're going to be an outsider. And if the nearest town to you is a small town, everybody there has known each other their entire lives. And they're not going to be super welcoming to you. There's a lot of really beautiful nature out here. Deer, crane, heron, bald eagles, all sorts of really nice things. So it's really beautiful out here. And as you can see, we've just been walking down the road and there's no cars because there's not a lot of traffic out here. And that makes things feel really safe. So that's definitely a plus to living out here. But you just have to think about whether or not the life you're going to be living is worth the trade-off. And for me personally, if I had to do it over again, I would be reluctant to move to a rural area because it's simply too difficult for me. If I had to do it again, I would definitely have said absolutely not, I don't want to. And if I had been made to do it, I would have come kicking and screaming. In closing, my biggest piece of advice for anybody considering moving to a rural area is definitely rent first. If you're considering moving to a rural area, find some place that you can rent. It doesn't matter how big it is. Rent it for a month. Just really experience what it's going to be like to be alone, however long you need to be alone, for your spouse to get back home from work, or whatever repercussions you're going to experience. You really need to experience them, and you need to experience them for a long amount of time so that you know what your projected future is going to be like. Rent first, don't buy.